We're going to hear more from some other Democrats running for office or trying to keep the offices they have about what they make of what the president has been saying. To the left of your screen here, this is Syracuse, New York. The president is speaking about a big investment that technology giant Micron Technology has made, a $100 million commitment to expand operations in that neck of the woods. But it occurs on the same day, as Jackie reported, that we had a surprisingly strong GDP report for the latest quarter. It's sort of like the snap one, the earliest one that comes out, showing on an annualized basis the economy was sprinting ahead at about a 2.6% rate after two contracting quarters in a row. The president has seized on that as a sign we're already through the worst of it and we're on our way. Karl Rove with us right now, whether the data supports that or not, that I guess, Karl, can be in the eye of the beholder. But the issue that he's championing right now is things are going well. The jobs backdrop as well. You wrote today about how that message sometimes falls on deaf ears and whether the president's helping Democrats or hurting them. What do you think?
Well, look, the president went out late last week and said that he had done all these great things to make sure the economy was stronger than it was before the pandemic. And he listed all the things that he had done in order to do that. But the question is, are there more people working today than before the pandemic? No, there aren't. There are fewer people working today than we had in February of 2020. Is inflation as low as it was in 2020? No, heck of a lot, higher. Almost 4 times as high as it was back then. Is the economy growing? Yeah, we had a number today, 2.6%. But Larry Lindsey, my former White House colleague, pointed out that the biggest contributor to growth in that quarter was the restart of the automobile industry, because they started getting semiconductors for the automobiles that they hadn't been able to sort of trick out, and that this is likely to be temporary because they're basically getting the backlog of orders filled. Real wages, are they rising? No. 18 months in which wages have not kept pace with inflation. Small businesses forming at the same rate as they were before 2020? No. Confidence, public confidence? No. Public confidence in both the economy is low, as your previous segment talked about. And so the president is saying, look, I've got it all under control. Don't worry about it. But that's not where the American people are. And it shows in his numbers. This is the Real Clear Politics average on the president's handling of inflation. 34% approve, 62% disapprove. Handling of the economy, 39% approve, 58% disapprove. If he thinks this is a winning message, we got it all handled, people, everything's rosy, he's misleading himself as to the impact of that message, and I frankly think sounding out of touch with reality to a lot of voters.
And apparently a lot of Democrats themselves, Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire, who is trying to hang on to her Senate seat, brought this up earlier today when it comes to issues like the border, that increasingly we're finding Democrats parting with the president. This is from earlier today.
The first job of government is to keep its people safe, and that starts, among other things, with a safe, secure, and orderly border so that we can also have a country that enforces the rule of law and lives up to our values, that the Biden administration should not prematurely lift Title 42. There's consensus that when Title 42 is lifted, there will be a surge of migration.
Think about it, Karl. That tester course in Montana, you've heard a lot of talk about the same thing, that the president is not doing enough at the border. You've certainly heard it out of Senator Kelly in the race of his life in Arizona. What do you make of this?
Well, first of all, congratulations. I'm glad they finally did it. But where were they? It's one thing for Maggie Hassan to say that 14 days for the election. Where was she last year when the Republicans were trying to add Border Patrol agents into the budget and the Democrats voted it down? Fine for Mark Kelly, less than a month before the election, to finally speak out and say the border is a crisis along the southern border of my state. But why wasn't he saying that last year, as we had the record number of illegal border crossings, which has now been exceeded by this fiscal year's? He's been silent for the last year and a half. Fine for John Tester, who faces election in 2024, for him to finally say, let's do something about the border. But where has he been? The Republicans have been trying to get more resources to the border and fine to criticize the president's policy here in the last couple of days of the race. But it doesn't show me that their heart is in it if they spent months and months and months and months of this administration sitting on the sideline quiet.
Is it better that Joe Biden stand down, that he not be part of this wave of prominent Democrats to help Democrats keep their jobs or take the jobs for some of these elective offices? I only say that because Barack Obama will be playing a key role. We're told Hillary Clinton will do her best to help out, the Vice President of the United States. You raise a compelling case today that the president might not be your best campaign tool.
Yeah. No, look, this is mystifying to me. Look, he has to be out there some, but it's a mixture. He's trying to be the campaigner in chief, and he ought to be the commander in chief more than he is the campaigner in chief. You know, they knew this was coming. So, for example, they knew the Chinese Communist Party was going to have its big Congress. If I were in the White House, I'd be sitting there saying, Mr. President, shouldn't we have some kind of an international meeting? Maybe you call a variety of people around the world to check in with them about the Chinese Communist Party Congress, or maybe you invite the Japanese Prime Minister or the South Korean President to come here, so that as we get the Chinese having their meeting, it's the President who looks like he is focused on international diplomacy, not doing Zoom calls for fundraisers for congressional candidates across the country. So it's better for the president to look like a president than to be out there as a campaigner when your numbers are lousy. Try and reinforce the job, the image that you're doing the job, rather than spending your time just mouthing platitudes that aren't sinking home with the American people and are not going to convey a lot of confidence to a lot of voters.
You know, real quickly, Karl, we were showing, some remarks that were caught on a hot mic of Chuck Schumer talking to the president about that controversial Senate debate, but expressing confidence they think they can pull this out. What did you think of that?
I thought it was an utter disaster. Nobody has ever lost a race that I'm aware of for refusing to debate. And why Fetterman agreed to this is beyond me. And then to go in and take the strategy of saying, every time my opponent says something, he's lying. And so when he got hit on the issue of fracking, he basically said my opponent is lying. When he got hit, when he's gotten hit in the campaign on the issue of advocating that a third of the prisoners in the state jails be released, he says I'm lying, even though he's on tape 15 times saying I like this, it's a profound idea, we must do this. I mean, it's a very odd strategy, but it started with putting him in that position where no matter how much they lowered their expectations, they were gonna find that they did poorer than whatever low level they set.
Yeah, there was not great wisdom in being there for that debate, regardless. Thank you very, very much, Karl. We're following so many other races across the country, including the New York gubernatorial battle, that in this bluest of blue states is actually a toss-up, or could be. Lee Zeldin, the Republican, making big advances, will be my special guest this weekend on Cavuto Live. We've calls out as well to Governor Kathy Hochul, see if she'll come on to debate what is arguably one of the bigger surprises of this midterm election year, a gubernatorial contest that's as close as a tick, when overwhelmingly Democrats have the advantage. In the meantime, taking a look at bringing in the biggest names to close the deal in the 12 days ahead, from Barack Obama to the Vice President of the United States, and indeed the President of the United States, trying to put them in places where they can make a difference. But are they putting them in the right places?
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.